In-laws refused to attend our wedding. 5 years later, they wanted us to pay for their retirement. My father-in-law's knuckles were white around his coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him from floating off the couch, and my mother-in-law sat beside him with her handbag on her lap, like she was at a bank appointment instead of in our living room. My wife, Lena, stood in the doorway with her arms folded so tight her shoulders were up near her ears, eyes glossy but furious. I was at the dining table with our bills spread out, electricity, daycare, mortgage, because we'd been doing the boring adult thing 5 minutes earlier, and then the doorbell rang, and suddenly I was staring at the same two people who couldn't make it to our wedding, demanding we do the right thing for them now. The air felt too warm, like the heater had clicked on even though it hadn't. My pulse was loud in my ears. "I'm not asking," my father-in-law said, voice clipped, as if he'd already practiced it in the car. "I'm telling you what needs to happen. We're your responsibility now." Lena let out a sound like a laugh that got strangled halfway. "We're my responsibility?" she repeated, incredulous, and her hand went to her chest like she was checking her own heartbeat. "You didn't even come to my wedding." My mother-in-law's smile was tight and sugary. "That was different," she said. "We had our reasons." I stared at them, then at Lena, then down at the bills like they might rearrange themselves into a new reality where this made sense. My hands were flat on the table, fingertips pressed into paper. I could feel the ridge of the wood grain through my skin. "What exactly are you asking for?" I said, careful, because I could feel myself hovering on the edge of something ugly. My father-in-law didn't blink. "A contribution," he said. "Monthly. It's only fair. You're doing well. You have a house. We need to be comfortable. We didn't work our whole lives to struggle at the end." Lena's eyes flashed. "Comfortable," she echoed, and now her voice had that brittle calm that means she's about to burn the room down with words. "You mean the kind of comfortable where you tell your daughter she's dead to you unless she marries who you approve of?" My mother-in-law's mouth tightened, and for a second I saw a flicker of annoyance at being called out, not guilt. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "We never said you were dead." Lena's laugh turned sharp. "You sent me a letter," she said, voice shaking now. "A literal letter. Who sends a letter in 2019 unless they want it to feel official?" That was the moment my stomach dropped into that cold, focused place, because I knew exactly which letter she meant. I'd watched Lena open it at our kitchen counter back then, watched her face change line by line, watched her sit down like her knees had given out. I'd watched her fold it neatly afterward, not because she wanted to keep it, but because she couldn't throw it out like it wasn't part of her. And now they were here, acting like time had cleaned the blood off the knife. It was 5 years ago, almost to the week, when Lena and I got married in a small ceremony that we paid for ourselves. Not because we were trying to be noble or minimalist, but because we didn't have a choice. Lena's parents refused to attend. Not couldn't make it like a scheduling thing. Refused. Like we were inviting them to something shameful. We met at work. I was in IT support, Lena was in finance, and she was the kind of person who made spreadsheets look like art. We started as lunch buddies, then late-night coffee runs, then that quiet moment where you realize you're rearranging your day just to be in the same room as someone. Lena told me early on that her parents were intense, traditional, image-obsessed, the kind of people who asked what your father did before they asked your name. "I'm not for money. My dad drove trucks. My mom worked nights in aged care. I grew up with secondhand furniture and the kind of vacations that were a day trip to the beach with sandwiches in a cooler." I didn't feel ashamed of that until I met Lena's parents and saw how easily they could make normal life sound like failure. The first time I met them, I brought wine and flowers like a respectful adult, and her mother, Mary Ann, took the bouquet like it was a suspicious package. Her father, Graham, shook my hand and held on half a second too long, the way men do when they're trying to establish something. Dinner was polite until it wasn't. They asked where I went to school. They asked if my family owned property. They asked what my long-term prospects were, like Lena was a business asset and I was applying for a loan. Lena tried to redirect. She always tried. She'd squeeze my knee under the table, a silent apology for their questions, and later in the car she'd stare out the window and say, "I'm sorry. They're like this. It's not you." But it became me the second Lena told them we were moving in together. Her mother cried. Actual tears, like Lena had announced she was joining a cult. Her father got cold and said, "If you insist on living like that, don't expect support." Lena stood her ground anyway. That's who she is. She moved in with me, and the world didn't end, and her parents responded by going quiet for months, like silence was punishment. When I proposed, Lena cried in that happy, disbelieving way. We were sitting on the floor of our tiny rental, eating Thai takeaway out of plastic containers. I didn't have some grand plan, just a ring I'd saved for her in a moment that felt right. Lena said yes, then immediately looked scared. Not of me, of what would come next. Telling her parents was like stepping onto thin ice. We drove to their house on a Sunday, sat in their spotless living room, and Lena held my hand so tight my fingers went numb. "We're engaged," she said, smile shaking. Her mother's face didn't light up. It tightened. Her father didn't say congratulations. He stared at the ring like it was a mistake he could correct. "How long have you been planning this?" Marian asked. Lena blinked. "Planning getting engaged?" "Don't play dumb," Marian snapped. "This is your life." Graham finally spoke. "You're making a choice," he said, slow and heavy. "And choices have consequences." Lena sat up straighter. "He's not a consequence," she said. And I loved her for that, but I also felt my chest tighten because I knew this was going to cost her. Her mother did the thing she always did, turned it into martyrdom. "After everything we've done for you," she whispered, like Lena owed her a particular kind of husband in repayment. Lena's voice went thin. "Everything you've done for me was your job as parents." That's when Graham said it, flat as a verdict. "If you marry him, we will not attend." The room went quiet in that surreal way, where the air feels too clean, too still. I remember hearing the hum of their fridge from the kitchen and thinking, absurdly, their fridge is louder than they are. Lena's eyes filled. "You can't be serious." Graham didn't flinch. "I am." Marian stared at Lena with this look that made my skin crawl, like Lena was being deliberately difficult. "We have standards," she said. "We have a reputation." Lena's voice broke. "I'm your daughter, and you're embarrassing us," Marianne replied. I still remember the way Lena's hand slipped out of mine, like she couldn't hold anything anymore. We left without yelling. Lena didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stood up, wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand like she was annoyed at herself for crying, and said, "Okay." We got married anyway. We planned a wedding that fit our budget and our reality. We invited them anyway. We sent a printed invitation, even though Lena knew they'd hate it, because she needed to know she'd done her part. We called. We texted. We tried. The answer stayed no. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived. A letter. In an envelope with their return address, like they were sending legal paperwork. Lena opened it at our kitchen counter while I was making pasta. She read the first line, and her face went blank. She read more, and her hand started shaking. She handed it to me without speaking. It wasn't long, but it was brutal. It said, in careful, polished language, that they could not support this union, that Lena was making a reckless choice, and that if she went through with it, she should not expect financial or emotional support going forward. It ended with a line that made Lena choke on a sob. "We hope one day you come to your senses." She folded the letter with meticulous precision and put it in a drawer. Then she went into the bathroom and threw up. On our wedding day, Lena walked down the aisle anyway. Her best friend walked her. My mom cried so hard she needed tissues stuffed up her sleeves. Lena kept her chin high and her eyes wet, and she looked both gorgeous and shattered. When we said our vows, her voice steadied on the words, "I choose you," like she was saying it not just to me, but to the ghosts of the parents who should have been there. After the wedding, Lena didn't talk about them much. She didn't rant. She didn't do dramatic Facebook posts. She just adjusted, like someone who'd lost something and had to keep living anyway. Holidays were awkward. Her parents would occasionally send a stiff text to Lena on her birthday. "Hope you're well." No mention of me. No mention of us. No epaligi. Lena would stare at her phone, type thanks, delete it, then type it again because she wasn't ready to burn the bridge completely, even if the bridge was made of splinters. Life moved. We worked. We saved. We bought a house. Nothing fancy, just a modest place with a backyard that needed work. Lena got promoted. I switched jobs, climbed into a better role, started earning more. We had a baby, our son, Eli, 2 years ago, and becoming parents rewired everything. Lena softened around our own little family and also got sharper about boundaries. She didn't want Eli growing up around conditional love. Her parents didn't meet him until he was almost 6 months old. And when they did, it wasn't some warm reunion. It was like they were inspecting a purchase they'd tried to cancel. Marianne cooed over Eli and said, "At least he got my eyes." And Lena's face went still in that way that means she's swallowing rage. Graham patted Eli's head once like he was petting a dog. They never apologized for skipping our wedding. They treated it like it had been a minor disagreement, and now we should all move on. Lena tried, for a while, because that's what people do when they want a family. But she kept them at arm's length. Then, 5 years after our wedding, the same wedding they refused to attend, they showed up on our doorstep and asked us to fund their retirement. Not help sometimes. Not, "We're in trouble. Can you advise?" Fund. Monthly contributions. Like we were a pension plan. And here's the part that makes it even more surreal. They weren't destitute. They weren't sleeping in a car. They weren't starving. They were just unhappy with their version of retirement. Graham had retired early because he deserved it. Marianne had stopped working years ago because she managed the household. They bought a caravan they barely used. They'd taken trips. They'd lived like the future would politely pay for itself. Then the money started thinning, like money does when you spend it and don't replace it. Apparently, they'd invested a chunk in something safe that wasn't safe at all. Some friend of a friend scheme, dressed up in impressive words. They'd also remortgaged their house at some point. Something Lena didn't know, because they wanted renovations and quality of life. They were now looking at a retirement that required downsizing, adjusting, accepting less. They did not want to do that. They wanted us to pay so they could keep living the life they felt entitled to. In our living room, Graham tapped his mug like punctuation. "You have a good income now," he said, eyes on me like I was a calculator. "And Lena's doing well, too. It makes sense for you to contribute." Lena's voice was ice. "You cut me off," she said. "You said no support. Remember?" Marianne's eyes went wide in performative shock. "That was about the wedding," she said, as if it was a separate universe. "This is different. This is family." I felt something hot rise in my chest. "So family counts when you need money," I said before I could stop myself. Graham turned to stare on me. "Don't be disrespectful," he snapped, like he hadn't been disrespecting our marriage for half a decade. Lena stepped forward. "No," she said, voice shaking now with anger she'd stored for years. "You don't get to talk to him like that in our house. You don't get to come in here like you're doing us a favor." Marianne sighed dramatically. "Lena, you're being emotional." Lena laughed, but it sounded like a sob. "You didn't come to my wedding," she said again, and I realized she needed to say it out loud because they'd spent years acting like it didn't matter. "You sat at home while I walked down the aisle without my parents. You made me choose between you and my husband. I chose him. I chose my life. And now you want us to pay for yours." Graham's face hardened. "We raised you. And I was grateful," Lena said, eyes bright, "until you made your love conditional." Marianne's voice turned sharp. "We are not beggars." "No," I said quietly, unable to help it. "Beggars are usually humble." Marianne's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me." I stood up. My chair scraped the floor, loud in the sudden silence. "You don't get to come into our home and demand we fund your retirement," I said, keeping my voice level because Eli was napping in the next room, and the last thing I wanted was to wake him to a family blow-up. "If you need help budgeting or you want resources, financial counseling, downsizing options, fine. But you're not entitled to our paycheck." Graham's nostrils flared. "This is her husband talking," he said to Lena, like I was some spell controlling her. Lena's eyes flashed. "No," she said. "This is me. I'm saying it too." Marianne's lip curled. "So that's it? You'll let your parents struggle?" Lena's voice went low, deadly. "You refuse to celebrate my marriage. You don't get to benefit from it." For a second, I thought Marianne might actually acknowledge what she'd done. Instead, she leaned back and said, "If you loved us, you would." That line, "if you loved us," made something in Lena crack. "You don't get to test my love with your bank account," Lena said, and her hand was shaking now, but she didn't back down. "You didn't even come to my wedding. You sent me a letter like you were firing me. And now you want a monthly payment like I'm your employee." Graham's face went red. "We are your parents," he said, voice rising. "You owe us respect." Lena nodded slowly, like she was seeing the final piece click into place. "Respect," she repeated. "You mean obedience. You mean money. You mean me doing what you want so you feel important." Marian stood up, handbag clutched tight. "Fine," she snapped. "If this is the kind of daughter you are now, don't expect us to be in your son's life." Lena's laugh was bitter. "You already aren't," she said, and that was the saddest truth in the room. "You visit when it suits you. You criticize everything. You call it love." Graham pointed at me. "You've poisoned her against us." I opened my mouth, ready to fight, but Lena cut in first. "Stop," she said, loud enough that both of them flinched. "Stop blaming him for your own behavior. I was there when you refused my wedding. I was there when you wrote that letter. I was there when you told me your reputation mattered more than my happiness. This is not about him. This is about you wanting to avoid consequences." Marianne's eyes were glossy now, but again, it didn't read like remorse. It read like frustration at not being able to control the story. "I can't believe you're doing this to us," she whispered. Lena's voice softened, just slightly, and it made my chest ache because it was the sound of a daughter who still wished her parents were different. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said. "I'm just not rescuing you from choices you made." Graham grabbed his mug like he might throw it, then set it down hard enough to clink. "We didn't come here to be lectured," he said. "Then why did you come?" I asked genuinely. They stared at me like the answer was obvious. Money. Deference. Control. Marianne's voice sharpened. "We came because Lena is our daughter, and children look after their parents." Lena nodded slowly. "Children look after parents who look after them," she said. "Not parents who punish them for loving someone you don't approve of." Graham's face twisted with anger. "So you're choosing him again?" Lena's answer was immediate. "Yes," she said, "and I'd do it again every day." The room went quiet, heavy. In the next room, Eli made a soft sound in his sleep, a little sigh, like the house itself was trying to calm down. Marianne stared at Lena for a long moment. Then she did what she always does when she's losing. She made it dramatic. She grabbed her handbag, marched toward the door, and said, "Fine, enjoy your life. Don't come crying when we're gone." Graham followed, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff. At the threshold, he turned back and looked at Lena with a coldness that made my skin prickle. "This will come back to you," he said. "Mark my words." And then they left. The second the door clicked shut, Lena exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 5 years. Her face went pale. She sank onto the couch and stared at her hands. I sat beside her, careful, like she was something fragile. "You okay?" I asked softly, even though I knew she wasn't. Lena laughed once, shaky. "They didn't even ask how Eli is," she whispered. "They walked in and talked about money. That's what I'm worth to them." My throat tightened. "You're worth more than that," I said. And it felt stupid because of course she is, but sometimes you have to say the obvious out loud when someone's parents are trying to rewrite their value. Lena rubbed her face with both hands. "I knew they were like this," she said, "but I didn't think they'd be so bold." I looked down at the bills still spread on the table. Daycare, groceries, mortgage, our boring life that we built with effort and planning. "They're not bold," I said quietly. "They're desperate and entitled." The fallout was exactly what you'd expect, and worse. Marian started calling relatives, framing it like Lena had abandoned them. Suddenly, Lena's phone was buzzing with messages from her aunt. "Your parents are heartbroken." Her cousin. Family helps family. Someone even sent Lena a paragraph about honoring your parents, as if honoring means handing over your paycheck. Lena tried to respond at first, explaining, reminding them about the wedding, about the letter, about the years of coldness. Most of them didn't want the context. Context ruins a guilt trip. One night, after Eli was asleep, Lena sat at our kitchen table with a glass of water she hadn't touched and said, very quietly, "They're going to tell everyone I'm evil." I reached for her hand. "Let them," I said. "People who know you won't believe it. And people who believe it weren't safe anyway." Lena stared at me, eyes wet. "I hate that it still hurts," she whispered. "Of course it hurts," I said. "They're your parents." The next week, Graham texted Lena a number. Just a number. No filo. No explanation. It was a monthly amount, high enough to make my stomach flip. Lena stared at the message for a full minute, then handed me her phone without a word. I read it and felt my jaw tighten. "They didn't even say please," I said. Lena's voice was flat. "Because they don't think they have to." That night, Lena wrote a response. Not angry, not long, just clear. "We will not be providing monthly payments. We can help you find a financial advisor and look into downsizing options. If you want that help, let me know. If you continue to pressure us or involve other family members, we will take space." Graham replied within 30 seconds. "So you choose shame." Lena stared at it, then put her phone down like it was hot. "There it is," she whispered. Marion showed up at our house again 2 days later, alone this time, crying on the porch with mascara running, performing heartbreak like she was auditioning. Lena opened the door and just stood there, arms crossed, not stepping aside. "I raised you," Marion sobbed. "I sacrificed everything, and you're letting me rot." Lena's voice was quiet and steady. "You're not rotting," she said. "You're uncomfortable. There's a difference." Marianne's eyes flashed through the tears. "So you want us to sell our home?" "I want you to live within your means," Lena replied. Marianne's face twisted. "You're cruel," she whispered. Lena nodded once, like she'd finally accepted the label they'd always wanted to put on her when she didn't comply. "Okay," she said. "If boundaries look like cruelty to you, that's not something I can fix." Marianne's sobs turned into anger fast. "He changed you," she snapped, pointing past Lena into the house like I was lurking behind her. Lena didn't even glance back. "No," she said. "I grew up." Marianne stood there breathing hard, then hissed, "You'll regret this," and walked away. After she left, Lena shut the door and leaned against it. Her shoulders were shaking. I walked up and wrapped my arms around her, and she finally cried, quietly into my chest, the kind of cry that isn't about the moment, but about all the moments stacked behind it. "I wanted them to love you," she whispered. "I wanted them to come to the wedding. I wanted them to be grandparents. I wanted normal." I held her tighter. "I know," I said. A month later, we heard through the family grapevine that Graham and Marianne had sold the caravan, then the second car. Then, finally, they put their house on the market. Not because Lena paid them, but because reality doesn't negotiate with pride forever. They told everyone it was their choice to simplify. They told people Lena forced their hand. They told people they were starting fresh. Fine. Let them tell stories. People like them always do. What mattered to me was what happened in our house. Because after all the noise, after all the guilt messages and porch theatrics, Lena started to look lighter. Not happy. Exactly. Grief doesn't disappear, but lighter in the way someone looks when they stop carrying a weight that was never theirs to carry. One night, Lena pulled out that old letter from the drawer. She hadn't touched it in years. She set it on the table, smoothed it out, and stared at it for a long time. "I kept this," she said quietly, "because I wanted proof I wasn't crazy." I swallowed hard. "You weren't," I said. Lena nodded, then, very calmly, tore the letter in half. Then in half again, then again, until it was just pieces of paper. She dropped them into the bin and washed her hands like she'd gotten something sticky off her skin. "I'm done negotiating with people who only want me when they need something," she said. And the strangest part? She didn't sound angry when she said it. She sounded peaceful. 5 years ago, they refused to attend our wedding because they didn't respect our marriage. 5 years later, they wanted us to fund their retirement because suddenly our marriage was useful to them. I wish I could say the ending was satisfying in some dramatic way, like everyone clapped and the in-laws learned humility. Real life doesn't do that. Real life gives you messy consequences and half apologies, and people who still think love is something they can leverage. But I can tell you this. I watched my wife choose herself. I watched her choose our family. I watched her stop begging for crumbs from people who hoarded affection like currency. And when our son gets older and asks why grandma and grandpa aren't around much, we're not going to lie. We're going to tell him the gentlest version of the truth. Some people think family is an obligation they can cash in. We believe family is something you show up for, especially when it matters.